Ahab told Jezebel all about Elijah had done, how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah saying, "So may the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life like the life of one of them by this time tomorrow." Then he was afraid. He got up and fled for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah. He left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a solitary broom tree. He asked that he might die. "Is it enough now, O Lord? Take away my life, for I am no better than my ancestors." Then he lay down under the broom tree, fell asleep. Suddenly an angel touched him and said to him, "Get up and eat." He looked, and there at his head was a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. He ate and drank and lay down again. The angel of the Lord came a second time, touched him, and said, "Get up and eat, otherwise the journey will be too much for you." He got up and ate and drank, and then he went to the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the Mount of God. At that place he came to a cave and spent the night there. Then the word of the Lord came to him, saying, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He answered, "I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away." He said, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." There was a great wind, so strong that it was splitting mountains and breaking rocks in pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind, and after the wind an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire a sound of sheer silence. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. Then there came a voice to him that said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He answered, "I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away." Then the Lord said to him, "Go, return your way to the wilderness of Damascus." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
So you and I have been through another one of those weeks, haven't we? I wonder where you were when you first heard about the Orlando shootings. I was on my way to worship here last Sunday, just shortly before the 8:15 service, and the first announcement I heard was, stunning enough, 20 people had been killed in Orlando, and that was just after a singer had been killed the night before in the same place. Oh my goodness. And then on the way home, I heard the number had gone up to 49, 50 if you include the shooter. Oh, what awfulness. What awfulness. I went home to Beauty. I went home to my youngest granddaughter. She'd spent the night with us, the first time she'd spent an overnight at our house, and she was just absolutely an angel. We told her mother, nobody believes it but us, because we saw it. It was amazing. And when she left to go home, I thought I'd turn on the Golf Channel and see what was happening, and what I got instead was ABC, and there was a news report on more details out of Orlando, and I thought, what in the world do you do now? I felt so absolutely helpless. And I wondered about all the petitions I have been praying since at least Columbine, that such awfulness would stop. And in so many other instances. In my prayer list there are 16, but there are many, many more than that, where people have been so brutally killed. Doesn't God listen, I ask myself? Doesn't God answer prayers? Because that hasn't been stopped yet, not as far as I can tell. So I was stunned. I felt helpless. Maybe you felt something similar, just empty. Thank goodness for the iftar dinner that was being held here last Sunday evening. I had been invited to a new member picnic, had declined going to that for a variety of reasons, but when I remembered the iftar dinner with the Turkish Muslim organization, I thought, here's something that I could do. I could go there. And I was amazed when I got there, how simply good it felt to show up, to just do something so small. Something small, but something that, for me at least, was a way to affirm my Muslim neighbors. And I have some of those. Some of you did the same thing. Some of you came to that dinner. I think there were about 40 of us there from Westminster or so. And the next day in the News Journal, I left this on the counter in the hallway, there was a report on what had happened. One of the best reports I have read on anything in the News Journal. It was complete, it reflected what went on, and there were some great pictures. I wasn't in any of them, thank you, Jesus, but it was good to read that. Something so ordinary, a meal with one another. Now that may not answer the question, where is the divine in all of this, or why such awfulness continues. I have no good answers right now to that kind of question. But just doing something was such a key. And then when I started thinking about this preaching assignment for today, I wondered, what is it that I'm called to say here? Which scripture lesson do I use? And when I listened to the story of Elijah and his dilemma, I thought, there's something here to hold on to, and that's what I would share with you this morning. Some small directions, not answers, but some directions. And maybe you heard some of that too in the lesson. Let me share what I heard for today. There are 4 parts, at least, to this story. In the first part, Elijah, the prophet of God, stops doing what he has been doing, at least for a short time. He leaves the land and the people of his birth, and he heads out where? He heads out into the wilderness. How many times do the people of God, the messengers of God, end up going to the wilderness? He goes there to do what? I think he went to catch his bearings again. And sometimes that helps. Just to stop what we do every day and take a deep breath and catch again where it is that we stand, where I live. And maybe that's of some help. Sometimes you've got to go to a place of wilderness and just let all that is so unfamiliar envelop you. Scary as that might be, just be there and feel what is present. And that's what Elijah does. And then when he gets to the wilderness, he falls asleep and he has 3 dreams. Some folks call those kinds of events epiphanies, visions. A messenger of God comes to Elijah, feeds him, and then sends him further into the wilderness. To this point, I think Elijah begins to realize he's the one who's done the deciding. He's figured out where to go and what to do. And now he follows. He lets someone else take the lead. And with that vision from that messenger, he simply goes. And sometimes that's all you can do, is just go where the voice, the vision, the thought sends you. And last Sunday I got sent to a supper. Tom Stout loves to eat, and I'll tell you, it wasn't bad. But I didn't go there because I wanted to. I went there because I felt sent. Something small. And then comes the third part. Where's the messenger send Elijah? He sends him deeper into that wilderness of Sinai. He sends him to Mount Horeb, which of course, as you may remember, is another name for Mount Sinai. And you remember with me how important Sinai is in the story of God's people. It is the place where Moses has revealed to him God's name. It is the place where Moses brings the people back and they become formed as a people as they're coming out of Egypt. It's the place where God makes his covenant. I will be your God. You have to only be my people. And here, by the way, are 10 words, 10 commandments by which I call you to live. This is a place of formation. Sometimes you got to go back where you started. And that's what happens here. And on the way back there, I wonder if Elijah also got the other piece. The name he bears, Elijah, itself means El, God, Yahweh. Translated properly, Yahweh is God. The Lord is God. Not you, Elijah. The Lord is God. And it is a reminder, at least to me as I reflect on this, that the one who is the ground of all being, of all that is, if there's anyone in charge, that's the one in charge. Even though it doesn't make sense all the time. Elijah needed to be reminded. And so does Tom. So maybe you. Now, one last step. Elijah learns to hear God in a new way. And this is probably the one section of the story everybody is familiar with. And the choir sang so spectacularly just now about it. And didn't you love the way that ended? The quiet, the absolute quiet. The translation Walt read ends that the voice of God was in sheer silence. Do you know what sheer silence is like? It happens so seldom. It's kind of like what we just experienced now, but it's quieter. King James puts it much more poetically. God is in the still, small voice. Because even in silence, God does not stop seeking you and me out. And in the silence, Elijah hears what comes next. And the voice of silence says to him, go back. Go back to where you came from. Go back to the wilderness of Damascus, the wilderness of the city, the wilderness of Wilmington, the wilderness of Orlando. Return to the wilderness. So I wonder, in a time of deep emptiness, in a time where desperation feels like the only way, what is it that the Holy One says, and how will you and I hear? How will we hear in the silence? Well, strangely enough, I didn't hear, but I felt. Go to the dinner. Go. Do something. And I did. I felt my way to that dinner. I kind of listened with my heart, not my head, not my ears. I listened with something deep within. St. Benedict called that listening with the ears of the heart. And I invite you, listen with the ear of our heart. Now I have to end with one short story that those who went to that dinner will have remembered Mukhtar Khan telling. It's the story of a Sufi. Sufis are the wise people of the Islamic tradition. This Sufi lived in a village, and he decided he wanted to get closer to God, so he made his way to the mountain where you always go to hear God. And he went up there, and he stayed there year after year after year. 10 years later, he thought, maybe it's time to go down the mountain. And he went down the mountain and went to his village, and my goodness, everybody was at each other. I mean, there was nothing but strife in the village. And so he went to his home, and lo and behold, there was strife in his home. People were just at each other. And he went to his brother closest to him, and the brother said, "Where have you been?" And there was more strife. And the Sufi said, "Why'd I come down? I'm going back to be with God. And I have a question for God." And he got up there and he asked this question. He said, "God, why don't you do something down there? The place is a mess." And God said to him, "I did do something." "Well, what'd you do?" "I sent you. I sent you." That's enough for one morning.